Welcome to Family History Mysteries, a podcast that tells the stories uncovered through family history research, the unexpected stories of everyday people. I am an avid family historian who has been compiling my family tree for over 15 years, with nearly 20,000 people recorded in my trees. And please put a review on my podcast. That will certainly help in getting the word out there and creating more listenership. Episode 275. The Bagpiper. Simon Alexander Fraser was an Australian bagpiper, stock rider and whipmaker of Scottish descent. Simon was born on a boat in Port Arthur, Van Dieman's Land on the 13th of February 1845. He was the eldest son of 12 children. His father, Hugh Archibald Fraser, was a Scottish magistrate and had migrated to New South Wales on the 12th of April 1829 and lived in the River Hunter Valley. He worked as a farmer, but he lost most of his money within 15 years owing to bad crops and heavy betting. Hugh then became an overseer at Port Arthur's penal settlement in the 1840s, and he married Mary Anderson in Hobart on the 8th of March 1844. Simon Fraser's mother, Mary Anderson, was descendant from the McCrimmon's family, who were traditional pipers to the Clan MacLeod, and she was a granddaughter of Charles MacArthur, a Scottish bagpiper. The Frasers were all musical, and Simon played the violin, the flute, the concertina, accordion, and the bagpipes. His father had been taught the bagpipes by Ian Dub McCrimmon in Skye. His mother, being the granddaughter of Charles MacArthur, whom Charles MacArthur had been extensively taught by Patrick Og McCrimmon. She may have been a descendant of the McCrimmon family herself. She was not a piper, but she knew much of piping history. She taught Simon the pipe rock vocables that were secretly handed down by word of mouth and by lilting from mother to eldest son. These vocables were also known as canter-reed. He was also taught the secret language of the pipers, in which by inserting extra notes a warning could be given. Canter-reed is the Scottish Gaelic for chanting. It's an ancient method of teaching, learning and memorising the type of music primarily played by the Great Highland bagpipers. In this method of instruction, the teacher sings or hums the tune to the pupil, sometimes using specific syllables which signify the sounds to be produced by the bagpipe. When an appeal came from Scotland seeking the lost vocables, Simon Fraser sent tunes. Many of these letters and manuscripts are now in the National Library of Scotland in Edinburgh. By 1848, the Fraser family relocated to Barwite in Victoria near Mansfield when Simon was a small child, and he spent most of his life living in the district. As a stock rider with his brothers, he drove sheep from Mansfield to Melbourne. He learned the art of whip making from a local Aboriginal stockman, Nangus Jack. Fraser wove 44 strands into the longest whip that had been made in Australia. Fraser married Florence Macmillan, a Scottish dancer, at Mount Battery Station in Mansfield in November 1872. They had 8 children, 2 of whom became successful bagpipers, Jack and Hugh. On the 9th of June 1882 in the Alexander and Yea Standard, Mr. Simon Fraser, whip and harness maker of Mansfield, whose manufactures have acquired more than local celebrity, advertises his price list in our columns. His charges, as will be seen, are extremely moderate. And on the 1st of December 1882, his advertisement is in the paper for his business. Simon Fraser, champion stock whip maker of Australia. Stock and hunting thongs made to order in various styles of plaits. He then listed plaited girths and plaited kangaroo girths, as well as plaited bridles, breastplate martingales and waist belts, and it says that any of the above are posted free to any port of the colonies on receipt of a PO order for the amount. All hides used by Simon Fraser are prepared without lime and softened by a new process. However, by 8 years later, on the 13th of February 1890, in the Tungamar and Lake Rowan Express of Victoria, Simon Alexander Fraser, a new insolvent, whipmaker and musician of Benalla. Cause of insolvency, inability to obtain sufficient employment to support himself, his wife and his 7 children. His liabilities were £174, 15 shillings and 8 pence, with his assets being £96 and 16 shillings, leaving a deficiency of £77, 9 shillings and 8 pence. On the 13th of March 1896 in the Violet Town Sentinel of Victoria, important to violinists, Simon Fraser, violin maker and musician, Benalla,
Simon Fraser has a new process of imparting a greater body of tone, clearness and carrying power to instruments, making them easier to play and removing the harshness. Fraser's band open to engagements for balls and parties, charges moderate. Don Hassel of Benalla was the only man able to crack this whip and performed the triple crack before the Duke and Duchess of York in 1901. Fraser whips made by Simon and his son were taken by John Rimmel in the early 1930s for sledge team work on his polar expeditions. On the 24th of May 1901 in the Benalla Northeastern Ensign. Benalla ought to be a prominent place in the memory of the Duke and Duchess of York because it furnished in the Stockman's procession in Melbourne during the Commonwealth celebrations a champion bullock whip cracker, Mr. J. Tompkins, an invincible cracker of the stock whip, Mr. Dan Hassel, and a prince of stock whip makers in the person of Mr. Simon Fraser. The whip which Dan distinguished himself in cracking was made by our own townsman, Mr. Fraser, and was given to the Duchess of York at that beautiful lady's own request. On the 8th of February 1901 in the Morwell Advertiser in Victoria. Federal Senate. Elections. To the federal electors of Victoria. Gentlemen, I beg to announce I am a candidate for the Federal Senate. I've had the honour of representing the people of Rodney in the Legislative Assembly for 9 years, and those of the South Yarra Province in the Legislative Council for over 14 years. I've also had the distinguished honour of being selected by you as a delegate of the Federal Convention which framed the Commonwealth Bill. My intimate knowledge of the whole of the states will, I trust, be conducive to my usefulness should I be returned as one of your representatives to the National Parliament. Yours faithfully, Simon Fraser. Simon Fraser was an outstanding buckjumper and steeplechase rider, and he won many events. He once challenged any man in the world to compete with him in a triple event, playing the bagpipes, riding a buckjumper and plaiting the longest whip. No one took up the challenge. Simon actually did not play the pipe seriously until he was 40. He took bagpipe lessons from Peter Bruce in Benalla, riding his horse each way from his home, that is 60-kilometre distance. The Bruce family from Glenelg, Scotland, had been taught music from Donald Rard McCrimmon and Captain Neil MacLeod of Gesto, and they migrated to Australia in the 1830s. Simon Fraser was Peter Bruce's only pupil. They both knew the secret McCrimmon traditions, and it was easy for Simon to take up the pipes. Later he made his own bagpipes and was reputedly the first to use kangaroo skin in preference to the traditional sheepskin. He won championship contests in playing throughout Australia. On the 30th of December 1904 in the Benalla Standard, it says at the Molayula Public Hall, a grand ball will be held in aid of the Piano Fund on Monday evening with Fraser's music. On the 13th of October 1905 in the Benalla Northeastern Ensign, a Scottish concert under the auspices of the Mansfield Caledonian Society will take place, with the noted Highland piper Mr. Simon Fraser of Benalla being specially engaged for the occasion, as well as his accomplished string band. Mr. Fraser opens the program with a selection of Scottish airs, and after the usual interval introduces several Irish airs. Mr. Fraser, as a musician, is like himself as a man, a cosmopolitan. His teacher, Peter Bruce, left Fraser his bagpipes in his will. With 5 of their children, the Frasers toured Victoria as a musical group, including a performance at Government House in Melbourne. The ensemble provided clarinet, piccolo, piano, 2 violins and a harp. In addition to bagpipe playing, Fraser played the violin and the flute, and he continued to work as a stock rider and whipmaker. On the 14th of July 1928, Mrs. Fraser passed away in East Melbourne. She died at the age of 77, and it's said that she suffered from periodical attacks of bronchitis for some years and had been in hospital 10 days before her death. She is survived by her husband and 5 children, and it says that their son, Ralph, who lived in Mildura, received the sad news too late yesterday morning to catch the train. The Mayor, Mr. Patterson, conveyed Mr. Fraser to Melbourne in his car. On the 11th of April 1929 in the Melbourne Herald, there was a recollection, an old bushman talks. Just over 100 years ago, in 1828, there came to Australia 2 Scotsmen whose pioneering work caused their names to be given to the Glengarry and Macalister rivers in Gippsland. Captain Macalister and the young chief of Glengarry were accompanied by a number of Highlanders, including Hugh Fraser, a redoubtable piper. His son Simon, a virile Scottish Australian of 84, lives today in East Melbourne with his children and grandchildren. It is difficult to say of which country Simon is most proud, Scotland or Australia. At one moment his talk is of the heather-clad hills. In the next he's back again at the bush stations where most of his life was spent. As he talks, his mild eyes glimmer through a shock of snow-white hair that tumbles over them, and he chuckles or grows sad in the recollection of incidents in his long and active life. Fraser has passed his skills of the harp to his own son. Hugh is a noted competitor of Highland gatherings throughout the Commonwealth. When Sir Hector MacDonald visited Australia, he passed through Benalla, as a Mrs. McGilwray was related to him. Sir Hector stepped from his carriage and Simon presented him with a stockwhip. Mr. Fraser possesses a letter from Sir Hector thanking him for the stockwhip and an enclosed autograph photograph. Mr. Fraser was 9 at the time of the Eureka Stockade riot, but he has a clear recollection of the soldiers marching to Ballarat to quell the rebellious miners. He started work early in life and was engaged as a stockman and horsebreaker on stations in Victoria and New South Wales. An old stockwhip peddler named Angus Jack taught him the art of whip making, and he claims to have made the smallest whip in the world. The thong is plaited with 24 strands of green hide, each a 16th of an inch wide, and is so finely woven it can pass through a 1/4 inch auger hole. One of Mr. Fraser's whips is in the possession of the King, to whom it was presented when he visited Australia as the Duke of York in 1901. Another was used by Dan Hassel, who won the whip-cracking championship of Australia in 1924. I wandered on the Murray River once. I met a mob of 300 Aborigines at a corroboree, he said. They cooked a black snake and gave me a feed, and it tasted all right. While breaking outlaw horses on Delatite Station in the Mansfield district, he met Morgan the bushranger, a sinister figure who left a vivid impression on the old man's mind. Black Bill we called him then, but we know him later as Morgan. He worked on the station but was unsociable and remarkably quiet. He used to sit in the corner all night and not say a word to the rest of the station hands. He disappeared suddenly with a wall-eyed mare belonging to one of the boys. A winning rider in steeplechases himself, Mr. Fraser recalls several crack horsemen of his day. He gives precedence to Adam Lindsay Gordon, the poet, whose tragic death in the Brighton scrub he remembers well. Gordon was a fearless rider, always ready to attempt the most daredevil feats when mounted. He was held in awe by even the hardened bushmen. He was a fair terror on horseback, and most of the riders were afraid of him. Lean of figure, clear of eye, Mr. Fraser at 84 takes a keen interest in current events, but he has one bugbear: noise. Noise is killing people nowadays, he said. Noise and excitement. I believe that most of our young people are suffering from neurasthenia. I spent my life in the quiet of the bush where people get time to live. That's why I'm able to get about at 84. And on the 6th of June 1931 in the Melbourne Australiasian, Mr. Simon Fraser, one of the best craftsmen the trade ever had, is still living in Melbourne. Years ago he received instructions from Angus Jack, the professional whipman who travelled the country making and selling his first-rate products. Mr. Fraser is 86 and has proven himself a cleverer craftsman than his instructor, and the whips of his making are treasured by King George V and Queen Mary and the Prince of Wales. And on the 18th of April 1934 in the Melbourne Age, on the 17th of April at Mansfield Hospital, Simon Alexander Fraser, dearly beloved husband of the late Florence Fraser, aged 90 years, father and mother reunited at rest. Simon was a student of both the Bible and the Quran. He was a great reader, a radical thinker, and always ready to enter a debate which was frequently fiery. A little on Simon's children. Their first child, Lily Florence Mary Fraser, was born on the 5th of December 1872 at Mount Battery near Mansfield. She married Arthur Parkin on the 3rd of July 1895 at the Congregational Church in Rutherglen. They had 4 children and lived at Corowa, New South Wales, and then Colac, Victoria. Arthur was a grocer. Lily died on the 21st of November 1922 at the Sacred Heart Hospice in Darlinghurst, New South Wales, aged only 49. The second child, Simon Jr., was born in 1874 in Mansfield. In 1928, he was a musician with his sister Laura in Melbourne, and in the 1931 census he's listed as living in East Melbourne as a musician. However, I'm unable to find a record of death. Mary Elizabeth Fraser, known as Polly, was born in 1877 in Mansfield, Victoria, but I'm unable to find any further information on her. The fourth child was Hugh Archibald Fraser, who was born on the 7th of April 1879 in Mansfield. He was a champion piper of Australia and taught by his father, and he also made excellent stock whips, like his father, Both men declared that plaiting kept their fingers supple for fingering the pipes. He married Edith Jane Portbury on the 6th of January 1902 in the Presbyterian Manse in South Melbourne, and they had 9 children. On the 19th of August 1905 in the Melbourne Weekly Times, Hugh Fraser of Albert Park, champion piper of Australia, is also a draughts player and has a rather unique history. He was born at Mansfield, Victoria 25 years ago and learnt the bagpipes at 8 years of age. He gained many prizes as a boy and at 18 won the Championship of New South Wales at Sydney. He's won first prizes 3 times in succession in the open competition at Mansfield and Geelong and has been the champion of Australia for the past 3 years. He makes his own pipes up to every detail. He's now busy making a new set, which he thinks will be the best he's ever made, and the one now in use he has sold to one of his pupils. His father and both grandfathers were noted pipers in their day, and there's no wonder he excels. And in 1913, he was living at Albert Park, and his occupation was a musician. On the 8th of April 1915, in the Curran Borough, Great Southern Advocate of Victoria, the annual school picnic occurred on the 24th of March, and the attendance was a very large one. During the afternoon, selections were played on the bagpipes by Pipe Major Hugh Fraser. On the 22nd of November 1935 in the Melbourne Argus, an adverse judgment and a decrease of the number of pupils who went to him for music lessons were the reasons advanced for the bankruptcy of Hugh Archibald Fraser, brewery attendant of East Melbourne and formerly of Oakley, when he was examined in the bankruptcy court yesterday. His estate was sequestrated on his own application on the 25th of June, and his statement of affairs gave assets as nil and liabilities amounting to £144, of which £60 was said to be due to 5 unsecured creditors, principally for money lent, and £84 in respect of a judgment. The official receiver's report stated that Fraser was formerly a music teacher. Apparently he had insufficient income when the number of his pupils dropped to pay household expenses, and he borrowed from moneylenders to pay the bills. He guaranteed for Mrs. Mann payment of the balance of purchase money for a motor car, which she traded in for another motor car. The motor agents who provided the second motor car paid the agents for the first motor car £50 in full satisfaction, but afterwards it was discovered there was a mistake and that £120 should have been paid. The difference in the sums was demanded from Mr. Mann, and when it was not forthcoming, a judgment with costs was obtained against her and also against Fraser as a guarantor. On the 5th of September 1936 in the Melbourne Herald, opinions vary from the ardent patriot who says that the bagpipes can play anything to more cautious Scots who admit that anything is possible with the bagpipes but say they would not like to hear the national anthem on them. The Governor, Lord Huntingfield, will attend the ball and will be received by a Guard of Honour of the Victorian Scottish Regiment. On such occasions it's customary for a band to play the first 8 bars of the national anthem, but the instruments in the regiment's band are bagpipes. The Secretary of the Caledonian Society said the playing of the national anthem on the bagpipes simply wasn't done. The Secretary of the Victorian Scottish Union said he had not heard it played and would like to. A Victoria Barracks military officer laughed at the suggestion, but an officer of the Victorian Scottish Regiment did not allow emotion to run away with him. He said, "They can play it all right. What's more, they can play The Wearing of the Green and they can play Waltzing Matilda. But it seems that strictly the national anthem is not pipe music and it's not played by the pipes on formal occasions." It would not be out of place, he said, to welcome the Governor at the ball with the old Scottish Royal salute. Melbourne's expert in these matters, Pipe Major Hugh Fraser of the Caledonian Society Band, said that he had played the national anthem on the pipes, but it was not usually done. The pipes were played in A minor, and it did not have a sufficiently big range. On the 24th of September 1949 in the Melbourne Herald, it said that the bride's uncle, Pipe Major Hugh Fraser, will pipe the bride into the church when Miss Elizabeth May Sprague is married to Mr. Donald Frank Holstock at the Little John Memorial Chapel at Scotch College. And Hugh died on the 19th of February 1970 in Cheltenham, Victoria, at the age of 90. Another child, John Thomas Fraser, known as Jack, was born in 1881 in Mansfield. He married Isabel May Winnack in 1903 in Albury, and they had 3 children. And he died on the 1st of September 1913 in East Melbourne, aged only 32, when his youngest child was only 3. Their 6th child, Queenie May Fraser, was born in 1886 in Mansfield. On the 27th of October 1905, in the Benalla Northeastern Ensign, it says Fraser's popular orchestra of Benalla, composed of Miss Queenie Fraser of violin and Mr. R. Fraser piano, and they played at a ball and concert at North Burman on the 11th and were greatly appreciated for their ability. Queenie married William Albert Sprague in 1910 in Victoria, and they had 4 children. In 1916, they were living in Kyabram, where William was a draper. In 1924, they were living at St Kilda West, where William was working in sales, and then were living in Melbourne East by 1931. In 1943, William was working as a traveller, and Queenie died on the 8th of September 1966 in Sandford, Victoria, aged 80. The next child was Ralph. He was born on the 17th of March 1888 at Barwite in Victoria. On the 27th of October 1914 in the Rochester Express in Victoria, it says Mr. Ralph Fraser, a South Street prize taker, appeared in a Highland costume and played a series of patriotic and national airs on the bagpipes in a manner to prove him worthy of his laurels. And on the 17th of July 1915 in the Geelong Advertiser, tonight at the Mechanics Hall, the Distress and Relief Fund Committee arranged a bright and attractive program, leading local performers taking part, and it mentions Jock Fraser, champion piper. He enlisted in World War I in July 1915. He had his mother as his next of kin, who was living at South Geelong at the time. He served at Moascar and returned to Australia in July 1917. He married Olive Miles in 1921 in Geelong, and they had 3 children. On the 2nd of November 1922, in the Geelong Advertiser, it says, after an engagement extending over 10 years with Brighton Hitchcocks, Mr. Jock Fraser, who's well known in and around Geelong as an efficient piper and member of the pipe band, is resigning from his present position and proceeding to Mildura, where he has secured an appointment in charge of the men's department in a large drapery establishment. Mr. Fraser has at all times taken part in charitable movements and given his services freely to assist any effort for the advancement of the city and district. And then on the 23rd of November 1922 in the Geelong Advertiser, by the 5:25 train yesterday afternoon, Mr. Ralph Fraser left Geelong for Mildura, where he's accepted an appointment in charge of a drapery establishment. Prior to saying farewell to his colleagues in the men's department of Brighton Hitchcocks, where he was held in the greatest esteem and very popular with employees and customers, he was presented with a gold Eversharp pencil as a token of the regard in which he was held by his former colleagues. Mr. Fraser made a fitting response when thanking the donors. Just prior to going, Mr. Fraser received the sad news of the death of his sister in Sydney. On the 31st of December 1925 in the Mildura Sunraysia Daily, Mr. Ralph Fraser, who's been a manager of Mr. J. Zimmer's menswear department for the past 3 years, and Mr. Clements, a salesman with the same firm for the past 7 years, have entered into partnership as general drapers and men cut fitters under the firm name of Fraser and Clements. And on the 18th of December 1926 in the Mildura Sunraysia Daily, Mr. Ralph Fraser's opened to the public of Mildura a menswear and hat store and has many points of distinction. The equipment of the store is pleasing. The shop does represent a marked step forward in the design and structure of a specialty store. The dedication of an entire menswear business is an innovation, and the press of customers since the opening day of this new store gives ample proof of the wisdom of the proprietor in authorising this department from the commonplace. The greatest degree of service to the public comes from the specialising in one particular branch of the public's requirements. Ralph Fraser recently took over the mercery, hat and hosiery department of the Zimmer store for men, representing the spirit of progress which gives to the public the best possible service. And on the 4th of January 1929 in the Mildura Sunraysia Daily, Mr. Ralph Fraser of Mildura was especially engaged as a judge at the annual Highland piping and dancing competitions at Broken Hill and returned to Mildura on Wednesday. The officials of the Broken Hill Caledonian Society were so satisfied with Mr. Fraser's judging that they've already re-engaged him for next year's contests. On the 29th of April 1932 in the Mildura Sunraysia Daily, his many friends and former customers will be pleased to learn that Mr. Ralph Fraser has accepted the position of manager of the Trufford Tailoring and Clothing Company in Mildura. Ralph enlisted in World War II in November 1941. He was an assistant storeman at Goodwood Park, South Australia at the time of his enlistment, and on the 10th of October 1945, he was deemed medically unfit. Olive, their daughter, enlisted too. She enlisted on the 21st of January 1942 in Air Finance, and she was a clerk, and she was discharged in 1944. Ralph died on the 11th of May 1971 in South Australia at the age of 83. And the youngest child, Laura Hilda Fraser, was born in 1891 in Yarrawonga. She lived in Geelong from 1914 until 1919, when she lived in Richmond and was a saleswoman, and I'm unable to find any further information on her. So I hope you enjoyed the story on Simon Fraser, the champion bagpiper, stock rider and whipmaker.
If you are interested in sharing your story on my podcast, Family History Mysteries, please go to my Facebook page and send me a message. If you would like some assistance in filling in the gaps in your family tree to see what mysteries you solve, please get in touch. And don't forget, you can have early access to episodes by subscribing, and you'll also gain access to bonus episodes.